Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
7:06 now on O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here to our busy Tuesday morning. Coming up in 30 minutes, our pal Matt Foldi from the Washington Reporter just came back from Israel, where he, spent most of the time in bunkers as missiles were raining down on Tel Aviv. But now it appears we have peace, or at the very least a ceasefire, and hopefully a lasting peace. Coming up at 8:35, Congressman Jim Jordan, chairman of the Judiciary Committee. We'll see if he'll take up Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's impeachment plans over President. How dare President Trump bomb Iran and their nuclear capabilities and bring peace to the region? He must be impeached. That's where the Democrats are on this. I'm Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
We are watching history unfold before our eyes. Don't get me wrong. I'm cautiously optimistic, and certainly not popping fireworks and champagne bottles quite yet, because, there's one player in this whole affair that you can't really trust, and that's Iran. They're a terrorist state, have been since day one, and it's hard for them to make peace with the great Satan. That said, it appears the events of the weekend have led to a ceasefire that the president announced yesterday, and it seems to be holding so far. So what does this mean in the long run? Let's check in with Guila Franklin Siegel, Chief Operating Officer for the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. Thanks for joining us, ma'am.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, from your perspective, what is your sort of assessment of the president's decision over the weekend to use military force against Iran's nuclear capabilities, and then his continuous calls for peace and what appears to be Iran's acquiescence?
First of all, I think that there was pretty much wall-to-wall support in the organized Jewish community for the president's decision over the weekend. Iran is a terrorist state. Iran has been responsible for destabilizing the Middle East for decades. Iran has stated its desire to destroy Israel and destroy the United States. And while I think that Israel was prepared to handle this war on its own, America has vital interests in defeating Iran and removing and destroying their ability to be a nuclear power. Now, as far as peace goes, I think that waking up this morning has been a very similar feeling to waking up many mornings over the last 2 weeks, in that events are moving very quickly, and that we're at a very fragile moment. The ceasefire was announced, and it seems that Iran broke that ceasefire. And we know that at least 4 people were killed in Beersheba in southern Israel. And so we can only hope that President Trump's desire to have a ceasefire now holds, and that the parties can make it through this rough, fragile period at the outset here.
Yeah, the accusations from Israel, and it is true that that Iran fired missiles, is unsettling. Do you think that we can trust Iran in this ceasefire, or are they just sort of regrouping and in a planning stage? I think that I don't mean to be an Eeyore here, but I think their sudden sort of capitulation was shocking to people. And again, then with the firing of those missiles, do you feel like Iran can be trusted in their acceptance of this ceasefire?
Look, time will tell. I think it's a matter of looking at where Iran is severely weakened. It was going into this, it was in a weakened position because Israel had defeated Hezbollah. Israel had seriously weakened Hamas. These are their essential proxies. And in Syria, they also were completely weakened. Yeah. So I think it's a matter of proceeding cautiously and being vigilant and understanding the party who we're dealing with here. In the end, there's going to have to be a ceasefire, and there's going to have to be diplomatic negotiations to ensure that Iran does not regroup in the way that you said, to ensure that at this point Iran understands that after these attacks that it cannot flout international mechanisms for ensuring that they don't become a nuclear power.
So how does one move from a ceasefire, whether it's being respected or not remains to be seen, I understand, to an actual lasting peace? There are some calls for Iran to acknowledge that they have lost, that they must capitulate, and they need to surrender, basically, and say, okay, no more. Actually have a formal surrender of these hostilities and surrender to the war. Would that do it as well, or nothing short of regime change at this point, considering the history of this regime?
I think that regime change was never the stated goal of these military actions that were taken by Israel and the United States. If regime change happens, that is a natural consequence, and that's something that it would be a very positive development for the Iranian people, most of all. As far as how we make it to the next stage, I think there are going to have to be concrete deliverables and an agreement from Iran to allow very strict monitoring. For example, it seems to be very unclear at this point as to whether Iran removed uranium from Fordo. And if they did, where is it? And I know that the vice president said yesterday that on this issue that even if that was the case, the Iranians no longer have the capability to bring that uranium from 60% to 90%, which would be what they would need to do in order to create a nuclear weapon. But I still think that that's very, very worrisome. That was very clear from the time that the U.S. Attacked the Iranian nuclear facilities on Saturday night. Was what had Iran done? Had they removed the uranium? What was there, and how much damage was done to their ability? It seems that Israel and the United States set Iran back several years, but I still think the information is unclear.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there as we continue to watch the developments, and we have some statements from the president this morning as well. We'll share that with our listeners in just a moment. But in the meantime, thank you, Guila Franklin Siegel of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Washington. Thank you.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
I don't think so, but I'm not happy that Israel's going out now. There was one rocket that I guess was fired overboard. It was after the time limit, and it missed its target. And now Israel's going out. These guys got to calm down. It's ridiculous. I didn't like plenty of things I saw yesterday. I didn't like the fact that Israel unloaded right after we made the deal. They didn't have to unload. And I didn't like the fact that the retaliation was very strong.
President Trump outside the Oval Office, or outside the White House yesterday, I should say. It looks as though it's right outside the entrance near the Roosevelt Room. on the west wing of the White House just moments ago. He also posted on Truth Social. I'll read it to you. Israel, do not drop those bombs. If you do, it is a major violation. Bring your pilots home now. Donald J. Trump, President of the United States. That was about 20 minutes ago on Truth Social. So we'll see. This is, actually, forgive me. That was the president on the South Lawn on the way to Marine One. I just wanted to give you. He also dropped an F-bomb. I cut the clip, but he seems genuinely angry. He says, both sides don't know what the F they're doing, is how he put it. So we woke up early this morning hoping that the ceasefire may have held, and now it looks as though, we'll see. This is President Trump on his way to Marine One, heading to Andrews so he can then head to the NATO summit in Europe.
That's right.
So we'll keep you updated as the morning goes on. Meanwhile, the New York Times had a hit piece on Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy yesterday. It goes back and shows
his family.
And the entire family, yeah.
Yep.
Sean Duffy, once the resident playboy on The Real World. You know, the guy served in Congress for how many terms? I think he was elected in 2010, right?
Yeah, first of all, it was MTV. It was a reality show. And he was, 17? I mean,
maybe
he's gone on to some pretty impressive things.
Of course. And this is the funny thing. The New York Times and the left and the pop culture within the organized left in America glamorize and celebrate. Who was the most important political voice of last year's election cycle? Taylor Swift.
Right.
Right? Or Beyonce. Right? And it's like they elevate them. Here's Sean Duffy, who comes from that world as a reality star on The Real World, which, again, was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And they have to frame this entire thing. Once the resident playboy on The Real World is now a father of 9.
You can be the resident playboy and then go on as long as you advocate for leftist policies. Then they don't mention your past as a resident playboy. But if you turn to God and settle down and have 9 children, you're the enemy. And we got to we got to dredge up every playboy moment in your past.
By the way, this is a really stellar cabinet so far in these first 150 days for the Trump administration. Sean Duffy absolutely exceeding expectations. Like, okay, Sean Duffy is transportation secretary. All right, let's see how that can't be worse than Pete Buttigieg. He's kicking butt and doing a great job. And
he faced some really painful, scary, horrible moments. A plane crash, several other transportation disasters.
Yeah.
And he has been on it.
So the headline of the New York Times, MTV reality star in Trump's cabinet who wants you to have more kids.
What?
And they focus this whole thing about this sinister idea that people should have big families. One thing we like about Secretary Duffy and most of the people in Trump's cabinet is that they fire back and they respond in kind and in real time, if I can use that phrase. And he did. Secretary Duffy said, first of all, guess who was dispatched to write this profile on Sean Duffy? A reporter at the New York Times whose former beat was abortion correspondent.
Yes, the most miserable woman at the New York Times.
Yeah.
She loves baby killing. She loves sadness. She is a disaster.
Ms. Kitchener is genuinely disturbed that I'm happily married and have 9 kids, and brace yourself, didn't abort any of them.
Yeah.
Among the hard-hitting questions she harassed my team with, did I consider aborting one of my daughters? God. That was actually one of the questions that the New York Times reporter asked about Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy.
If I can just say one thing about the Duffys, they are such good people. They are just such wonderful people. Their entire family is so wonderful. And I will tell you, they're a big Catholic family. They've had 9 children, but they have this really interesting, unique thing of not making people feel bad if they don't have 9 children, which is sort of can be a thing, right? Like if you're a big family, it's like, oh, no, you know why they encourage you? Because they say who want you to have more kids. No, they don't do that. They don't say that kind of stuff. They just point out the joy of being in a big family and having a lot of family. It makes people want to have a big family when you watch the Duffys. And that's a different way of advocating for big families.
What the Duffy family is what something not very long ago in America we would refer to as normal.
Normal.
And is it okay for me to point out that Secretary Duffy's predecessor purchased 2 babies?
That's right.
from a woman who was hired to deliver her womb on behalf of two gay men who are, forgive me for pointing this out, biologically incapable by God's design to make a baby on their own in procreation with our Lord. So instead, they utilized a desperate woman and purchased her babies from her.
Right, and then they
that
cosplayed.
got celebrated.
Oh, yeah. And they cosplayed in the hospital room. They both sat in a hospital bed with the two babies as if they had delivered.
As if they had just delivered.
Yes.
Because I assure you, I've been in these hospital rooms and these delivery rooms. There are plenty of chairs for the fathers to sit in while the woman is screaming obscenities at you. But no, they had to sit in the hospital bed like they had just gone through
they had just delivered this child.
It's 7:23. Welcome to another chapter of WMAL's Military Medicine Minute, powered by Humana Military and the Friends of Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences. In the sweltering heat of the Gulf War, medics faced a new challenge: soldiers collapsing from dehydration faster than they could be treated. Enter the Quick Click IV, a rapid infusion device developed by military doctors. It allowed fluids to be delivered in seconds, not minutes, crucial when every heartbeat counted. After the war, EMTs and ER doctors saw its potential. The device was refined and renamed the Auto Infuser. Today, it's a staple in ambulances and trauma centers, saving lives in car crashes, natural disasters, and emergency rooms worldwide. Born on the battlefield, the Auto Infuser now races through city streets, still fighting to save lives, one drop at a time. And that's it for another Military Medicine Minute. Coming up, our man in Israel, back home where he belongs, Matt Foldi. Keep it here.
WMAL-FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's 7:37 on a busy news day here in the nation's capital, as our producer Heather Hunter and my co-host Julie Gunlock solve all the world's problems.
Sorry.
While we're trying to do a radio prayer. Are you two done?
I'm sorry.
It's quite all right.
We're done.
Plenty to discuss here on O'Connor and Company. Coming up at 8:35, Jim Jordan, chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Love that guy. Joining us now, though, Julie Gunlock, is another guy we love. Hanging with the fellas there in Tel Aviv was Matt Foldi, all during, well, what could be one of the most important weeks in world history, the 12-day war. Although, Matt Foldi, first of all, welcome home safely. Good to have you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Based on the events in the Middle East overnight here, maybe the president's tweet yesterday was a little premature. Is the 12-day war, in fact, over? What's the latest?
Well, I was going to say, for your 21st birthday, Donald Trump briefly brought peace in the Middle East yesterday. Is the 12-day war going to be a 13 or a 14-day war? I don't know, because, look, this is a war that's been going on since 1979, and I think, Iran violated this ceasefire fairly straightforwardly, firing these ballistic missiles, of which I'm very familiar with at this point, I think 7 times after they had allegedly agreed to stop firing ballistic missiles to try and kill everyone indiscriminately in Israel. And I think the lesson here is fairly clear. Larry, it should be your birthday every day so we could have more peace. And that genocidal mullah terrorist regimes are ultimately going to genocidal mullah terrorists. And I think it is a reminder to us in America that I was confronted with every day in these bomb shelters, that Iran is a different type of cat than the Soviets. And these are people for whom this world is transitory, and you cannot believe what they commit to on paper, because they want to die as shaheeds. I mean, the Ayatollah is an extremist zealot who's currently holed up in a cave because he doesn't want Israel to blow him up. And that's a set of circumstances that's very different from what we in the West are used to dealing with in the trade negotiations and defense pacts that Trump is going to NATO to try and hammer out.
Matt, doesn't this latest round of missiles coming from Iran, doesn't this strengthen the argument for regime change? Not necessarily us, us directing it, but some sort of movement towards regime change.
I mean, I think Trump's point when he was talking about making Iran great again is that needs to come from within. I don't think we can truly know what the Ayatollah's approval rating is in Iran, right?
Right.
And if you're dealing with rational people, I think that you'd have to make the argument that yes. One thing that we do know is that yesterday Israel was striking at some of the key fixtures of oppression of the Iranian regime, I think, Julie, to try and nudge people in Iran along a little bit more. We saw, for example, they took out the gate to the Evin prison, which holds countless political prisoners and has for years and years and years at this point. They took out the gate of that without harming any of the prisoners there. They took out even more of the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, buildings in broad daylight. Seems like Israel still has full operational control of the airspace. And what I thought was the coolest to me was I learned when I was in Israel last week, and I've never been to Tehran. I have very little visibility into what it looks like there. But in Palestine Square in Tehran, they had until yesterday a countdown clock to the destruction of Israel, and Israel destroyed that as well. So they're trying to make the case to the Iranian people, look, this is a regime that oppresses you all under the guise of being indestructible. And what is this regime right now? Not indestructible.
Yeah. I think it is noteworthy that this last bombing run that the Israelis engaged in, that the president acknowledged was already underway when he announced the ceasefire. He said, all right, Israel's going to finish their drop their load. I think it did go after the infrastructure of oppression, those organizations that have been, beating and jailing and throwing acid in the face of women who show a lock of hair under a scarf. That does make a difference, I would think, for the Persian street, let's call it. But this morning, the president seemed angry at both sides. I don't know if you saw his statement yet on his way to Marine One, heading to Andrews and then NATO. But he said, Israel, that was a really rough strike. He said, I don't think either side knows what the F they're doing right now. So, what is your assessment in terms of what the final outcome is going to be here? Because the president of the United States, who certainly has been a steadfast ally and a cooperator with the Netanyahu government in Israel, seems to be losing patience, Matt.
I think that this is, for the past 60, 72 days or so, look at Trump's actions in the Middle East and not necessarily his words. It seems like now, at least the Iranians are fully saying that they were played like a fiddle by Trump, Vance, Rubio, Witkoff with these negotiations. And ironically, Trump was doing to the Ayatollahs what the Ayatollahs did to Obama. He was stalling and then accomplished his goal, which was a limited strike on Iranian nuclear facilities. So Trump had some harsh words for both Iran and Israel this morning, absolutely. But at the end of the day, this is a guy who just bombed 3 Iranian nuclear facilities with 0 American losses. And Julie, to your question on regime change, I just think it's a reminder to Trump, to America, to the West, if the West even cares anymore, that the Ayatollah and his cronies are not honest brokers here. Now, again, what does that mean for who is going to be running Iran next? The Ayatollah is 86 years old. He's not getting any younger. And the people who he's looking to have potentially designated as successors are not that much better. And the shame of it all is that Iran, not necessarily Iran, but Persia, has such a storied culture. I mean, Cyrus the Great was one of the religiously tolerant. It's something that Netanyahu has invoked. He said that, Persia welcomed Jews in the past when Jews were expelled from Israel. Now Israel wants to help return the favor and liberate, the Persian street, as you were saying. I mean, Iran in 1979 was a first world country. Now they're regressing by the day back into the Middle Ages.
The potential of Cyrus Accords between Iran and Israel really does bring a tear to anyone's eyes who's read the Old Testament, as my people call it, Matt Foldi. Quickly, though, based on your reporting on Capitol Hill and also at the White House, What is sort of how are the political factions breaking down? There's a public face that everybody, for the most part, other than Massey and Rand Paul, are, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, are coalescing behind the president. Is that for real, or is a lot of that just political expediency right now, but there could be some cracks in the support?
One thing that I thought was interesting was I interviewed Kevin Hearn, who's a congressman who's also a private pilot from Oklahoma, and he flew some of his constituents who had been exfiltrated to Florida home from Florida to Oklahoma. And I said, well, I wanted to go noodling with him, but he said he's been very busy trying to pass the one big, beautiful bill.
Yeah. And then he'll help you catch one big, beautiful fish with your toes.
And he said that right now that is what he's trying to focus on. And Congress is barely good at trying to get one thing done, let alone multiple things done. So how is potential ceasefire in the Middle East going to also track with Trump's domestic legislative agenda? I think that, other than sort of the sticks in the mud that you were just talking about, there's huge support. I mean, every single Republican senator but Rand Paul wrote to Trump a month ago saying, we support your maximum pressure policy on Iran. We support zero nuclear enrichment, which Iran continues to insist upon because they want to use it for a nuclear bomb. And so I think there's still unified GOP support. Okay. Interestingly, there's also some Democratic support. Chuck Schumer's too cowardly, but Steny Hoyer, another Maryland man, he basically said, I support this. The few remaining fairly pro-Israel, pro-Western civilization Democrats in Congress, John Fetterman, said, absolutely, Trump, great job. We're not getting into a forever war. World War III never started. It's already over. Keep up the good work there. So that's, I think, the interesting thing is not so much GOP disunity. They're mostly unified. But it's Trump has gotten some Democrats to say, hey, good job.
All right, Matt Foldi. Thank you, sir. Welcome home, young man. Stay safe.
Making sense of your world.
Talk radio is where I get all of my information.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Making sense of the news.
Later this morning on the Chris Plant Show, Democrat Zohran Mamdani, running for mayor of New York, has got some big ideas. They sound an awful lot like the Soviet Union. 9 a.m. on WMAL.
So there's a further dust-up between the Kennedy Center and the cast of Hamilton, the producers of Hamilton. So here's what happened. Hamilton said they're pulling out of the season at the Kennedy Center for political reasons because, they only want to perform to friendly crowds that they think are liberal Democrats or something. I'm not quite sure. I guess they think only art is reserved for liberals and Democrats.
Guess so.
So here's what happened. Senator John Hickenlooper of Colorado, along with Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, Jackie Rosen of Nevada, Brian Schatz of Hawaii, and Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin, they rented the Justice Forum, which is a small theater. It's the new configuration that Kennedy Center did, off in the bunker there, experimental spaces. They rented the space for a pride event. They called it Love is Love. It was announced on Monday. The problem is the entire thing was booked basically as a fraud.
They booked it as it's going to be a talent show.
Right.
But then they switched it.
Hickenlooper's office said that they wanted to rent the space talent show. The management at Kennedy Center said, great, no problem. And then just days before the actual announcement, they said, it's all about pride, which, of course, baited sort of the Kennedy Center into saying, okay, well, that wasn't the auspices under which you rented this space, so they canceled the booking. And now the cast of Hamilton saying, look at they're canceling people because they're gay.
It's a setup. It's a setup.
The whole thing was a setup. Was a setup. It's a publicity stunt. President of the Kennedy Center, Richard Grinnell, put a lengthy statement out there about it. So, that's the latest. You're going to see a lot of fake reporting about this, saying that the Kennedy Center doesn't want gay people working there. I assure you, the Kennedy Center would go bankrupt if all the gay people had to go home.
Well,
there's plenty of gay people and gay content at the Kennedy Center.
But they have to do stunts like this in order to, create sort of this victim narrative because there isn't any actually. Discrimination.
That's right. There isn't. And this had nothing to do with being a talent show, and it had nothing to do with being a pride event either, and it had nothing to do with love. It had to do with using the space for a political stunt.
That's right.
And whether Republicans do it or Democrats do it, that's wrong. The arts should be for the arts. It's 7:53.
We all hear the radio ads about the IRS. They tell you to be a